It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Jen Cohen as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. As always, it is great to have you in studio today. Cottonwood Police Chief Steve Gesell in studio contacted me, wants to talk influences impacting violence in schools. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, I went just before we started here on the show, and as of May 11th, and you informed me that there was one just prior to doing the show, that there's been another school shooting. There were, out of the 19 weeks in 2018, there had already been 21 school shootings, and this includes just any kind of a shooting that happens at school, whether it be a violent type shooting or just like there's one that's an accident. A teacher was doing a class and a gun went off. But that's a lot. It says here that it averages out to more than one shooting a week. That's pretty alarming.
It is alarming. It's been alarming for many years, and we're almost 2 decades separated from Columbine, which was really the first significant school shooting that kind of changed the paradigm and the way public safety looked at it, and quite frankly our society as well.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of changes have we seen since that incident happened?
Well, I can tell you from a law enforcement perspective, which isn't, I mean, I think that's the smaller part of the discussion. The tactics in responding to a shooting a school shooting have completely changed from those days, and the training, every police officer across this country receives that type of training, coming either in the academy or out in service training. But unfortunately, as history teaches us, by the time the police get there, most of these are over, or they end very quickly once the officers are involved.
Yeah. So why the increase? What's going on that from when you and I were kids going to school,
right.
It never crossed my mind that someone was going to pull a knife on me, someone was going to try to tase me.
Sure.
Yeah, underwear out the back of the pants, stuffed in a garbage can maybe, a swirly in the bathroom, picked on, name-calling, things like that, bullying.
Right.
I've told you before the show that eventually I realized I was bigger than the person picking on me, and it just never happened again because I dealt with it myself. But what is it that is making this so acceptable, it seems like, anymore?
Well, it's a $1 million question, and this is something, playing the amateur sociologist and psychologist that cops sometimes do, that I've tried to study myself throughout my law enforcement career, which is almost 29 years, believe it or not. I have no idea how that happened. It's very disturbing.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Sometimes.
Time flies.
It does. But you know, just trying to piece and cobble together a list of social ills that may be variables that contribute to this, what is absolutely tragic outcomes and such hideous violence that occurs many times at our nation's schools. And there's a long laundry list of those, and how those variables, and to the degree that they impact an individual's choice to kill another human being, or quite frankly to, I think at this point it's a game in a lot of these warped minds to increase the body count, because they will be somebody.
What is the shock factor anymore? The shock factor for me when I was a kid is completely different than what shocks someone that's in their teenage years right now.
Sure, and you hit on it, and some of the shock factor, you know, even if you listen to today's popular music, the lyrics are somewhat shocking compared to when we were growing up, and those by themselves may not be tremendously impactful, but when you take little variables like that and you collect them, and then you start talking about putting them into a little vehicle called the World Wide Web, which again we didn't have when we were growing up. So it's very, very different growing up today and being a kid, bombarded with information just like we are now as adults. I mean, that you know, arguably the social media and the information flow that is touching every member of our society for the most part, but our kids, these are developing minds, and they have access to the social media They're trying to figure out their place in this world, and that is one of the talking points on my particular list, is the influence of social media and the detrimental effects that technology is having on a lot of our society, adult and kids.
We are taught right from wrong, though. I mean, I know it's wrong. Right, sometimes.
Sometimes you are.
But we're not talking about kids that come up from poor childhoods or poor raising or anything else. Some of these kids that are doing this are from wealthy families or educated families, and it's all about the kid and what's going on in the kid's head and what he thinks is acceptable or not. And I have a hard time wrapping my head around how any kid, no matter how bullied they are, there are other options
Sure.
to deal with bullying.
Sure.
And we've cracked down on bullying as well. But
Right.
you know, again, when you and I were kids, bullying kind of happened in school, and teachers say, knock it off, and shake hands or something like that,
Sure.
and you'd go on your own way. But now it's when do you get to that point where you think it's okay to take a gun to school and start shooting people?
Well, that's a great question, and the term, whenever one of these happens, the term, people like to say, hey, it's a mental health issue, and it may or may not be, but in a lot of the instances of the more prolific shootings, mass shootings, be they at schools or other places, very few of those individuals that I'm aware of had a diagnosed mental illness. I think for most of us, we sit back and we go, someone's got to be crazy if they're doing this.
Sure.
And I'm a person that says, not necessarily. It's that bizarre in our world today. But you mentioned the taught right from wrong, and I'm not saying or suggesting that single parent homes don't have the ability to teach right and wrong.
But it is more challenging.
It is more challenging, particularly single parents that are out there hustling, trying to keep food on the table.
2-3 jobs maybe.
Right.
Not
so
much.
the time spent with those kids may be less. But let's be quite frank, the 99.9% of all school shooters are male. So that being said, start looking to, okay, what's going on in our society outside the school, because it's not all what's happening in school. Most of this is pre-programmed.
It's a combination of things.
Combo in many cases.
Yeah.
But the familial support, the family support, absolutely a piece of it, where, days gone by, you had your parents, you had a nuclear family, you had grandparents, and you had this support mechanism and role models, and not just teaching right from wrong, but you had these role models in your family. And I talk to my kids now, and it's hard to find some of their friends, and I've asked how many of your friends have mom and dad at home, and it's a small percentage these days. At least it is in this region, and I don't think that's an anomaly. I also currently sit on the Mingus Union School Board, and we hear disciplinary hearings for long-term suspensions and expulsions. And during the last one afterwards, I just asked the administrators that have been through many, many of these, how many are male, and again, 99%, almost virtually all of them, that are facing serious school disciplinary measures, many of which have ties to violence. As did the school shooting yesterday. A kid was expelled, came back and started shooting at his campus before the school resource officer got to him. But I asked the question, how many of them come from broken homes? And it was about 90%. So I do believe that is a factor.
All right, let's take a break. Cottonwood Police Chief Steve Gesell in studio today. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide. We'll take a quick 2-minute break, and we'll be right back.
These hot ashes are about to be dumped, which could possibly start a wildfire. How will Smokey deal with such a hot situation? The garden hose defense. Next, a thorough stir. Then another spray. And finally, feeling if the ashes are cool.
Oh, yeah.
Ah, yes, the selfie. A ritual practiced so frequently with this tribe, but not so much by Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Being prepared is a part of who you are. But it's especially important in the case of a disaster. Be informed about possible emergencies in your area. Make a plan that covers where you go in an emergency. Build a kit with the things you need to survive. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Start your plan today. Go to ready.gov/myplan.
Welcome back to Countywide. We're talking about school violence, influences impacting violence in schools with Cottonwood Police Chief Steve Gesell. We wanted to jump onto inclusion policies, flawed inclusion policies. Let's jump into there.
Sure. So what I mean by that is, you know, we and the schools certainly are culpable to a certain extent in policies where we're kind of insulating them and creating this artificial environment where there's very little competition, there's very little opportunity to learn from failures. And everybody's a winner. So that, you know, we've heard chatter in our society about, hey, everyone's getting a trophy now. And I mentioned during the break, my son's soccer team was not good last year. I mean, they were pretty bad.
But everybody got a trophy.
Everybody got a trophy. And you know, what does that do in thinking, moving that 10, 15 years ahead for my son, when he gets out of that bubble? Did we really prepare them for failures and for the challenges that they're going to face?
Yeah, where's that drive of, oh man, we lost. We need to improve here, 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 and here. If we can improve these things, we're going to be better for it, and we're going to do better for it. But yeah, if everybody's winning, you really don't get that. Right, and the other story I mentioned to you just the other day, I heard a story that one school district just recently made a policy where there's really no tryouts to be a cheerleader. If you want to be a cheerleader, you can be a cheerleader. And one of the protests came from a young girl that had practiced, you know, for years and years and years to be the best at that. And she said, what does that tell me? What does that mean for me? But when you have those, everybody gets a trophy, or we want to make sure we're totally inclusive, and we shield kids from those learning moments when they didn't try as hard as they could, they didn't do their best. We set up an entitlement, which is another one on my tickler list here. We set up an entitlement scenario where people feel throughout their adolescent years that, hey, I'm entitled to this. So then they get to their adult years and I'm entitled to this, and this isn't fair. And not to mention their inability to cope with any type of failure, which we know makes a stronger human being, and we deal with failure. It's part of life. But the victim, and that's another one on our tickler list today, is that also contributes to what we call a victims society, where we celebrate being a victim, quite frankly, in very perverted ways, where it's not about a personal accountability. Another one on the ticker list. We've moved away from being accountable for our own actions, for reaching our own goals. If we can't do that, it must be someone else's fault. And that's where we get into active shooters' mind, or these people that go do this, is in their mind, they've been wronged. They've been victimized, and they feel powerless. There is no recourse other than violence. And the degradation and the loss of civility, another one on our tickler list, where we see it at the highest level of national politics, just people just being ripped to shreds, their character is being attacked. It's not what you do anymore, right? It's just, I'm going to put a label on you and dehumanize you, and after I do that, you know, I can do anything to you because you've been demonized. And our kids see that, and we've role modeled that for them. And so you translate that to an adolescent mind, someone that may have some type of mental issue, substance abuse, the access and the abuse of both
diverted legal drugs and illegal drugs, marijuana being included in those. People see marijuana as being harmless. An adolescent mind, psychiatrists, psychologists, many studies will tell you that a lot of that, in a small percentage of these young minds, is the gateway to schizophrenia. So those types of connective pieces, I think we really have to start looking into, but going back to that personal accountability, going back to those inclusive policies, those everybody gets a trophy policies. And I'm thankful here that our the school board that I sit on, that accountability is intact. So there are plenty of schools that don't follow that mantra, but I would encourage parents to get an understanding of what happens. But you at their school. But you had mentioned another variable, which kids nowadays, where if you don't turn your work in, you're given a chance to make it up later.
Get partial credit for it. I tell you, my son would not turn stuff in for a month or more. And I, of course, was told that the homework was all turned in. You sit down at the parent-teacher conference, it's not been turned in, but I'll give you 50% credit if you turn that thing in from 2 months ago. But here's the kid who did it all, studied really hard, turned it in.
Incentive?
What is the incentive to do it the right way?
And what did you teach the kid that you, and I have a daughter, same thing. She's allowed to turn it in, and part of me says, well, I'm grateful as it's algebra, and she's programmed like I am. We're not numbers people. But there's the accountability factor there. At what point do you wean them off of that? Because that's not reality. You just don't, hey.
If I don't show up for work for 10 days straight and I'm late every single day,
exactly,
that's going to raise some flags.
Exactly.
What do you say to the person who says, okay, Steve, Paul, this is the way you were raised, this is the way we did it then, but we've got this newer generation that coming in, this is how it's been handled, so maybe once you guys are gone, this will be a different society that we'll be living in, and maybe it will work.
Well, that segues into another one of the
should we take a break?
If you want to take a break.
Let's take a break. Let's take a break a little bit early, and we'll come back and we'll tickle that one next. Okay. Cottonwood Police Chief Steve Gesell in studio today. I'm Paul David. We'll take a quick 2-minute break, and we'll be right back.
That goes in.
This is Bruce Morrow, Transportation Manager for Cottonwood Area Transit. Remember, we cover the entire Verde Valley and Sedona. Cottonwood Area Transit has you covered wherever you want to ride in the Verde Valley, all day, every day. Take Cottonwood Area Transit through Clarkdale, Verde Village, and from 26 locations in Cottonwood. With Verde Links, it's a quick and easy trip to Sedona every day. Don't forget our connectors to Camp Verde. Visit cottonwoodaz.gov for Cottonwood Area Transit and take a seat. Let's go ride.
What to expect when you're expecting.
Like here?
A teenager.
Today, I'm going to show you how to teen-proof your home. First step, hide the car keys. Preferably somewhere they would never look. Challenges will come up. Be ready for them. Hi, honey.
Ready for the... Mom, you don't use mannequins in the mannequin challenge.
You don't have to know it all to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
If you don't fix them, sparks from dragging tow chains could cause a wildfire, and that could be scary. Smokey. Only you can prevent wildfires.
Welcome back to Countywide. We've got just a few minutes left of the program. We do want to hit a couple more topics. One is tribalism, lack of a common bond. These are your notes that you sent to me. And then I would like to have you talk a little bit about what can parents do to better prepare their kids. Maybe what's going wrong. We've talked a lot about it this morning. But what's going wrong that isn't allowing kids to be prepared for the great outdoors. So tribalism.
Tribalism.
We brought it up before the break.
Yeah, what I mean by that is, there's very few common bonds in our society anymore, and I think some of these kids that get involved in violence in school and go down a wayward path, they're not connected. They're usually, this common stereotype is they're considered loners, and they're not connected to anything, a school team, the school. Even when you start looking at our nation as a whole, there's a lot of schools right now. As an example, and we're short on time, I could spend an entire segment on talking about the lack of deference to the law, lack of deference to authority figures in schools, outside schools. It's propagated in the media, it's propagated by role models in our society, and our teens are mirroring that behavior. And then you couple that with a lack of accountability. But the tribalism piece, at my kids' school, I discovered there's no Pledge of Allegiance in the morning. And there's a lot of schools like that where that was an example of a common, I don't want to say ritual, but a tradition that didn't matter who you were. Everybody was, part of that, and they did it. And now that might offend some people. Why is beyond me, but that's an argument that's made. So that is missing in a lot of our classrooms, to the point where everyone's an individual, and I think that isolation is very dangerous, and we start giving that up when we lack of deference to the law, lack of respecting authority. How long ago do we start, kids start addressing adults by their first name? Just little things like that.
I can remember I had a teacher that I could call by first name, and that always surprised me.
Right.
It was in high school here at Mingus, but I was one teacher that I could call by first name. But up until that was Mr. Ingen,
right,
Mrs. Sanders, and,
which at one level is great because, hey, this person seems very friendly to me. But it starts to blur the minds in some kids is what should be a role model and a figure to aspire, to mirror those behaviors.
I see what
many
you're saying.
times becomes a peer when you do that, and that's just one simple example. And I'm not saying it's terrible. It is what it is.
No, but it's an example. So we've got a couple minutes left. So as parents, and maybe we should, because we talked about single parents, it's a difficult situation. What are some things parents can do to kind of see how their kids are moving along through life?
Well, in pertaining to, we're kind of strayed from the main topic, and that's my fault, but we talk very, very frequently about if you see something, say something. Right. So that includes students at school, it includes teachers, it includes administrators, it includes community members, it includes family members. So, for those parents, it doesn't matter if they're single or they got a nuclear family, be involved in your kids' lives. Actually understand what they're doing. I'm a big proponent of limiting access. A lot of these parents and people say, look, I don't have time. This phone keeps them busy. And there's a lot of bad programming that's being done without a lot of parents' knowledge. So be aware of what's coming through their devices. I would control their social media, or at least monitor their social media. Encourage their involvement in extracurricular activities so we can avoid some of that isolation at school where they're involved and they identify with different groups so they feel like they belong. And certainly mental health counseling for those that need it is always an option as well. But
nothing can be taken lightly anymore.
Unfortunately,
you hear the thing, oh, I was just joking around. Yeah. There is no more joking around.
No, unfortunately, yeah, that's those days of
they're gone.
Yeah, of playing. I used to play guns when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I used to go around my apartment complex with full replicas, and that was good fun for kids. And now you'd have a SWAT team respond to that. Unfortunately,
exactly.
So
yeah,
we just need to, as a society, I think we need to get to root issues and stop focusing on the outcomes of the symptoms, start looking at the causal factors and these societal issues. It's a very complex issue, but one that I think if we start looking at these variables from a holistic standpoint and trying to figure out what can I do as a parent, as a school board member, as a teacher, as a citizen in my community, what can I do to start focusing on turning the ship around when we start talking about some of the variables that we've discussed today.
Thank you for coming in.
All right. Always a pleasure.
Anytime you want to. Just, you know how it works.
I'll stop in.
Give me a call. Just stop in. That's it.
All right.
Cottonwood Police Chief Steve Gesell. I'm Paul David. This has been Countywide. As always, thanks for watching and listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.